Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Bree. Today we have a reading vlog for you, but before I begin, I want to let you know that this is me coming from the future. I am currently editing this video, and I want to say this was filmed over the course of a couple weeks, and my blue sweatshirt is a paid actor in this video here, and I just need you to know that these were different days and over many weeks, and I did wash the sweatshirt, okay? I'm just going to be wearing it a lot in the video, and I did not realize that every time I was talking about a book, I'm basically wearing that blue sweatshirt, so sorry. But I just needed it known that I did wear other things, and I did wash it, and so in case you were worried about that, I did wash it. And now that's out of the way, we can get into the books. So I have 4 different books to talk to you about in this video, and it's a range of genres, but I did participate in Kelsee's on Instagram and YouTube, her I Love Black Horror readathon, and the goal is with her readathon to read Black horror, and so I will be focusing on that in the video, as well as picking up a couple mood reading bits since I am a mood reader at heart. So I hope you enjoy, and let's just get into the video. You can see this duvet cover. I was gonna bring it upstairs, and then I discovered that it's really nice to lay on the couch in a duvet. So it feels very luxurious. So it's gonna be over here because I'm going to curl up after this little update and read. But I am checking in with my first book of the vlog because I picked up The Will of the Many. I started this on audiobook on a whim. My husband had read it and really liked it, and then I've seen it going around booktube, and the newest book is going to come out this year, and I had just seen a lot of good things about it. Everyone who reads fantasy seems to really like it, so I decided to give it a try just on a whim. I was looking for a book that I was in the mood for, and nothing was really catching my interest, so I started this one, and then I was immediately sucked in and had to go buy the physical copy because I am about a little under halfway, and I don't want to put it down. It's been really hard to try to update because I just don't want to stop reading to update, so that's always a good sign. I guess first let me tell you what the book is about. So first we're following Viz, and he is an orphan, and he works at this kind of like dungeon kind of place where people that have like done something wrong in the Empire are sent, and from what I can understand, they're getting like power leached from their bodies, and so they're tied up to these like machines. And he is working there when this guy comes and decides he wants to like go down to talk to a prisoner. And so he brings him down, and he accidentally overhears some things he shouldn't in a language that he's not supposed to know. And then that man comes back and decides to adopt him and raise him as his own. One of the big parts of this book is he's going to this elite academy where he competes and things like that, and he's trying to kind of like take down the Empire from within. So he has some things he's planning while he's in the academy that his new father is asked him to do, and then also he has some history of his own that he is also kind of working for his own motives, and so far it's really good. I just got to some like training scenes at the school. There's a lot of like the classes, and there's like levels to the academy, so you're watching him trying to move up the levels. And I will say he's very good at like everything. It's very he just tries something and succeeds at it, but where it's falling into like a lot of familiar tropes like the chosen one and things like that, I think it's doing it really well. He is a likable character, and he's not like cocky about things, so I think that's why when he's so good at things, it's like not as much of a bother to me. And I like the kind of school element and the like ways that they are learning and training it. I've heard it compared to Hunger Games. I don't think it's necessarily the same. I can see where people are getting the same vibes from it because there's like mazes and stuff, but I'm enjoying it. I think that there's like enough political intrigue happening while also being kind of smaller scale, because there's a lot of the book spent just like him acclimating to his environment and like training to go to the academy. And so like right now it doesn't feel like the world is so big. And the magic system, I feel that I understand well enough. I think that there's a lot I don't understand, but it doesn't seem to be impacting my understanding of the story. And I think maybe we will get more of how the magic works as things go on. It has to do with like will, and like you give will to other people and other people can take your will, and like there's different hierarchies. And so I think it's a very interesting magic system. I'm really having a good time. So I just want to give you that check-in. Kaladin just brought over his trash. We play Trash Mans with him, and he's very happy about it right now. My camera also died, so I don't remember exactly what I was saying, but this is what I'll be reading. I'll come back when I have more updates on that for you. But then also, I couldn't help it. I went to the bookstore. I picked up 3 books from Half Price Books, and they're all books that I had on my radar, so that's good. The first is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. I really like a retelling, and this is a retelling of Macbeth, but from Lady Macbeth's perspective, which is a Shakespeare story, if you don't know. I am just excited to give this a try. I don't know. I think it's gotten some mixed reviews, and I've yet to try. No, I did try an Ava Reid. I read A Study in Drowning, but I feel like A Study in Drowning was very different from what I've heard her other books are like, so I am excited to give it a go. I feel like she did atmosphere really well in A Study in Drowning, so I expect to like this, and I also just love the cover. So then I also have seen this book around for a while and been wanting to pick it up. It's The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. I think it came out in 2023. Yeah. And it's a kind of mystery, but I think it's more literary fiction leaning. So we're, I believe, following a young girl in 1962. She's like a baby, and she is from the Mi'kmaq tribe in Nova Scotia, and she's taken and goes missing. And then we also follow a young girl in Maine growing up to an affluent family, and she starts to learn things about her parents. And it says it's an exploration of grief, love, and kin. It says it's a story about the search for truth, the shadow of trauma, and the persistence of love across time. And it sounds really good, and I have been eyeing it for a while, and I want to read more books by Indigenous authors, so I picked this one up, and I'm very excited to have found it there. And then finally, the last one I found is Tochi Oniguchi's Goliath, which is a sci-fi novel set in the future in the 2050s, and it's about like privilege, I believe, and if the world was ending, like how things would look. It's supposed to be a like futuristic sci-fi. I think it's also like dealing with people who get like out of the situation and go to like another planet, and then it's like the people who are left behind and with little resources, like how they can survive, and just the exploration of power and privilege. And I think it's going to be really good. I've heard really good things about this, and I've never seen it there, so I was happy to see it. So there you go. There are the 3 books. I guess I can show you the titles. There are the 3 books I picked up at half price, and I will see you when I have more updates on The Will of the Many. Hello. I finished The Will of the Many, and I want to know what James Islington put in this book, because it's unlocked something in me. Like, I don't know what, but I loved this book. Like, I was obsessed with this book. And it's hard to talk about why, because if I'm going to give you any reasons why this book is great, a lot of it really revolves around things that are not that different in fantasy. Like, there's the chosen one trope, there's found family, there's like a magic school, there is competition, kind of Hunger Games-esque, and all of that. Like, I wouldn't say he's doing it in a super different way, or super unique way that's never been seen before, but whatever he did, it worked so well. I'm obsessed. I need the second one like yesterday, and I'm really struggling to know that I have to wait for this. Yeah, I don't know what he put in here, but it got me, and I feel like it's unlocked another level of fantasy reading for me, because I want more books like this. If you have books like this, please tell me so I can read them. I know I might end up comparing them, and they might not live up to the same hype, but yeah, I'm trying to think, because there's been other like really big fantasy books that I just didn't love. So I'm thinking like The Eye of the World, I DNF'd at like 50 pages in. And then I read The Name of the Wind, and I enjoyed it at the time, but like I had a lot of critiques of that book, and I don't, especially the second one, I do not like. If there's a fairy scene that if you know you know? And yeah, so like that didn't work for me. And then I'm trying to think, there was another one that I was thinking about before I came on to talk to you about this one. It's not coming to me at the moment, but oh, Game of Thrones. Like I didn't ever really read the book, but the TV show was okay to me. Like it's not my kind of thing. And so to me, epic fantasy has always been this like, I don't know, genre that like I can have a thing I like in it, but typically doesn't work for me. But then I read City of Brass last year and absolutely loved it. Like that whole series was a 5-star series for me, and then this is absolutely a favorite, life-changing. So if you have things that work in like that vein, I do like Brandon Sanderson, but I do not want to commit to over 1,000 page books. Like, no thank you. But this and City of Brass, even Mistborn, I really like Mistborn. If you have the recommendations like those, I will read them because it's unlocked something in me and I need more fantasy right now. So, yeah. So, yeah. I love this book. I think it was great. But I am going to go because my boss is doing the ice and salt and I do not want to see him recording. I don't want him to see me recording. So, I'm going to go and I'll tell you more about the book later. Hi, I have finished in one sitting The Deep by Rivers Solomon. I read this in one go. It's only 150 pages. And I read this because I'm trying to read some black horror for Kelsee Sweeties on Instagram and on YouTube, her readathon called I Love Black Horror. And I thought this was a horror. I wouldn't say it's necessarily its first genre. I can see where horror elements come in because it's talking about the horrors that happened in the history of the United States and the slave trade. So in that sense, it is horror, but it's also just kind of like a fantasy mythology feeling story as well. And it's got a very like dark, sad tone to it. So I read this because I thought it was going to be part of horror. And I believe I'm going to be picking up either The Between by Tanana Reevdu or The Changeling by Victor Laval. So I have some options as well that I'm going to continue on with. But this one I read, and it is basically the story of how these mermaids were formed from Black women who were pregnant when they went overboard on the ships heading to the United States for the slave trade. And it is about history and the trauma of the Black experience in America, remembering history. So there's a lot of quotes, one of my favorites being, "Forgetting is not the same as healing." And yeah, that just idea of, sorry, I am so crooked right now. So as I was saying, one of my favorite quotes is, "Forgetting is not the same as healing." And I think that's very pervasive throughout the whole thing about generational trauma and trauma that we passed down from our ancestors, specifically talking about the Black American experience. And we're following Yetu as she has like become the holder of the memories. So the way the memories work is that there's one who holds all the memories, and then there is a ceremony that they explore the memories together, and she like guides people through it. But for like most of the year, she is the one holding all the burden of that, and you see it take its toll on her and her want to escape knowing all the horrors that she does. And it dives into like collective trauma and trying to have everyone understand the history of where they've come from, and yeah, not putting that burden on one person. And I think that the message that River Solomon was trying to get across was very powerful, and I really appreciated the conversations in here. But I think the actual story was a little meandering at times. The story for 150 pages felt a little slow, which is usually not how I feel about novellas. Usually with something like this, I would want a little more, and I think that, yeah, I just struggled with the actual like storytelling aspect of it. I'm between like 3.75 and 4 stars. It, I think, has so many things to say and it does it well. I wish like almost that this had been a longer story and we could have got more of a plot, because this has no real like plot to it. And I think that's where the issues come in for me, is it meandered a lot and didn't have a focus other than the themes behind it. And for me, I personally like to have a plot that explores the themes. It's not a no plot book, because books have plot. I don't know where I'm trying to go with this, but it's just more meandering. It doesn't follow a clear-cut path, and so therefore kind of like makes you lose focus sometimes, and so that's where I struggled. So I think my ending rating is 3.75. I really appreciated the conversation. It just wasn't the storytelling for me. But I will be picking up more River Solomon. I've heard they came out with a book called Model Home, and I've heard good things about that, so I want to give that a try and see how I feel about it. That's all I have for this, and I will see you in the next book. Good morning. Sorry if you can hear my car. I feel like it's a bit loud today. But I wanted to update because I am 42% of the way through The Changeling by Victor LaValle, and I have mixed feelings on it so far. Okay, so where I'm at, I think the plot that is on the back is starting to unfold, but the beginning half, 40% I guess, is a lot of like a literary fiction feel, which I'm struggling to articulate what about this doesn't work for me, because I have read literary fiction and enjoyed it, but there's something about this. It's very mundane. It's following Apollo as he's a young boy, and he has kind of a weird instance where he believes his father, who has never been around, was in the apartment and stuff, and after that he starts to have these nightmares, and then it jumps forward to him as he's older, and his lifelong passion of books has become that he is like a rare book dealer. So he finds books and sells them, and he has met his wife, and they are expecting, and Emma is his wife, and we follow them as she has their son. And then this is where to trigger warnings if you are sensitive to this stuff, but it deals a lot with postpartum, I think, psychosis. And is that what's happening, or is there something else happening to Emma? And we're following in Apollo's point of view. We do get occasional like other points of view, but mainly it's Apollo's story. And where I'm at, we're following after these events happen that, okay, so it does say on the back postpartum depression. So she is dealing with postpartum depression, and then one day something happens and she disappears, and then Apollo is kind of trying to move on with his life, but he meets this guy who tells him that he knows where Apollo's wife is. So now he's trying to go find where she is, and it's going to lead on a big adventure, which I've heard it gets very like otherworldly. So that's why I was intrigued. But the first 40% to me has been like maybe a 3-star. I'm just very uninterested in just day-to-day life and like the daily struggles of life. And that's what the first chunk of this book has felt like. I think if I'm going to read like a literary fiction, it might be classified more under historical, I guess, but this like spanning view of someone's life, or like the key moments of someone's life, or like Natural Beauty was a literary horror, and that one I really liked because I was thinking about that one and this one last night of like why that one worked for me and this one's working a little less. And I think it's because the beauty salon that she goes to feels so otherworldly. It feels weird and like not something that would happen in real life. This just feels very like real life. And I think that's partly what I struggle with. It's just I don't enjoy books where I feel like I'm reading just about our daily existence. And so far that's what this has been. Now, I'm hoping if it gets weird, I can see it going up from here for me, because the title is The Changeling, so to me that gives like the Fae, where they used to swap babies and you would get like a changeling instead of your own child. Like that's what I thought this was giving. So we will see what actually happens in this, but I know Victor LaValle has been very well loved, this book specifically. I really liked Lone Women, and that one has gotten mixed reviews. But that one definitely is very different in tone to this one. It was very historical horror with like weirdness. Like, so that's what I'm hoping is he really went like there with his horror and it got strange. And that's what I'm hoping from this one and why I wanted to pick it up. He has another one I want to say out. I'll see if it's in here. Oh, he has many more. The Devil in Silver, I want to say is a vampire book, and so I'd be really interested in that because I do think I really like creature horror. And then I have really loved The Ballad of Black Tom. So this isn't my first Victor LaValle, it's just the first one that's more of a literary horror, and I just don't know if they work for me. So I'm gonna try to think on what it is truly that I don't love about it, but so far it's just okay. I'm really hoping the last half picks up because I want to love it so much. Like I've hyped this book up in my head So I'm have high hopes. But I will check in when I've probably finished or gotten to a point that I have more updates for you. So I finished The Changeling by Victor Laval, and I enjoyed it. I think the second half picked up more than the first half, and I did see how the events of the first half did tie into the second half. And yeah, the second half was weirder. It was a bit more like fairy tale mythology feeling, and I thought it was an interesting direction for it to go in, and it makes sense given all the hints and themes throughout the book that we're going to be dealing with some like mythology, hence the name of the book anyway. And I enjoyed the journey from the beginning to the end. I think it did make me appreciate the beginning part more. It was a bit weird, which I think Victor Laval, because I read The Lone Woman and it was the same way, he does blend genres really well. I think his books usually start out, at least these two that I've read, it feels like it starts out where you think the book is one thing, but then he kind of shifts tone later in the book. And so I think it helps ease you into the other genres that he's bringing into the book. At the beginning, like I said, it felt very literary. And then when I read Lone Women, it felt very historical at the beginning. But as the book progresses, you see the other elements come into play, and they just progressively get bigger and bigger until the story ends. And I really did like this. I think it brought in tech in a very interesting way for me. Also, I think it just had a lot of discussions around a lot of different topics as well that are in real life, like racism and postpartum depression and like the burden of motherhood and not being believed and being kind of told you're crazy and stuff. And so while the beginning of the book and the themes of this book, especially around motherhood, I think could be very triggering, I also think that it was a very interesting topic to read about, and the way that the story progressed in terms of the postpartum depression bit, I think was an interesting segue. And it also paralleled a lot of like women's struggles with abuse and things like that throughout the story. And so I appreciated it for that as well. And I like that he really makes me think I know where a story's going, and then kind of like leads it in a completely different direction. And I like the horror elements because they do feel so over the top, but for some reason it also really fits with the story. And yeah, I just like that his books don't fit into one category of, I can definitively say like, yes, this is horror, yes, this is fantasy, yes, this is literary. He just blends it all so well. So I think I'm ending on a 4-star for it. I was really at the 3-star range when I was reading before, but the second half really picked up and really like turned over a new side of the story that I think I appreciated. It made me appreciate the slowness of the beginning more. So 4 stars for this. I'm really happy I read it, and I really did like Lone Women as well. So he has more, and I think the next one I want to pick up is, I think it's called The Devil in Silver, and I believe that's vampires. So I do like a good vampire, so I'm excited to try that out as well. If you like a more literary leaning horror, I think this one could be one to give a try. And then I don't know what I'll be picking up next, but I'll just see you when I see you with my next book. Well, I'm basically in the same spot I just left you in the last clip, but I have been doing things. So I finished The Changeling, and then I picked up This Woven Kingdom on audiobook, and I was really enjoying it. I got about a quarter of the way in, and I decided today I was going to go to half price and get it because they had it. So I did pick it up, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a YA fantasy. It's a Persian-inspired mythology story, and we're following Aliza and Kamran. And Kamran is a prince who, is your typical prince who's been away fighting and is now just back in town. And then Aliza is a jinn, and she's hiding her... Okay, I was going to say, is that a spoiler? She's a jinn, and she's hiding her identity because she is like the long lost heir to the jinn throne, and she's just trying to survive. She is working as a servant, and she also does stitching on the side, and she is literally just trying to mind her business. And make sure she can be fed and sheltered. And she's really struggling because she's treated really poorly. And she also has to hide her Jinn heritage from others because Jinn in general are also just like discriminated against. And so she's struggling. And one day she is attacked by a young boy in the street, and the prince witnesses it, and then he's decided that she is a spy and he's gonna prove it. And so far it's been really interesting in his perspective because you just get to see him like kind of be confronted for the first time with like things that he never thought of, because he's just like, why is she doing that? And it's like a very logical reason, because she's trying to feed herself and do these things. Like I think at one point he questions like, why would she stay like at this place if she's like, because she's educated and stuff, and he can tell. She's like, why would she stay as a servant? And it's like, dude, because she needs to eat. And he like just doesn't ever think about that, because his whole life everything is served to him. He doesn't have to worry for anything. And so he's like encountering that like people struggle like for the first time. And then I really like Aliza's character. I think that she's like a very interesting character because she appears very timid on the outside, and that's like a self-preservation technique. And then she really like can take care of herself. Like when she's in fights, she's like really good at fighting and doing all that kind of stuff. She's very smart and stuff, but she just appears very meek because she is trying to protect herself and make it to the next day. And so it's gonna be, I think, a romance between them, but some things are gonna go down in the plot, I'm assuming. There's like some kind of prophecy with her, or like something different about her, and we're like slowly gonna figure that out, I think. And yeah, so far I'm enjoying it. I will be continuing and let you know more thoughts when I'm like halfway through. I'm not feeling the best today, so I think I'm just gonna lay here. I have a duvet that we've been keeping out, one because the cats like love to sleep on it now, but also because it's very cozy to like curl up and read in here. And that's what I'm planning on doing with this. But I did go to Half Price to get that, and then I didn't feel satisfied, so I went to Barnes & Noble, which arguably is not my best choice in the world because Barnes & Noble is very easy to spend money. But I unlocked something in my brain when I read The Will of the Benny, and I don't know what it was, but it unlocked it, and I'm full force in my fantasy era. I mean, I read fantasy before, don't get me wrong, it's like my top genre, but like, I guess like epic fantasy, very like higher fantasy, I've unlocked it. So I got 3 books. So this one is very similar, I think, to The Swimming Kingdom in that it's also a Persian mythology, and that's The Stardust Thief by Kelsee Abdullah. I've seen this around before, but I never really paid much attention to it. But then I can't remember who was talking about it, but I saw someone talk about it. I think it was maybe Elliot Brooks, but I'm not sure. So to me, I think this sounds a lot like a Aladdin retelling, because it does say that she saves the life of a cowardly prince, and she draws the attention of his father, the Sultan, who blackmails her into finding an ancient lamp. And obviously things go from there. I really like desert stories or Persian like stories. I think that they really have this like element to them that just like sweeps you away into the story. And so I've loved this. I've loved this. No, I haven't read this yet, but I'm really liking this, and I've loved City of Brass, and I recently read Empire of Sand, which takes place in India. And so I'm just really in that kind of mood. So I picked up this, and I'm very excited to get to it. I hope to get to it really soon. And then I've been intimidated by this author for a long time because I've just heard that they have like a very interesting prose and that the story's told in second person. And so I was really intimidated to read the 5th season. So I picked up The Killing Moon because I've heard this is a good place to start with N.K. Jemisin if you're like trying to dip your toes into it, and it's not as like epic as sorry, my brain is turned off today. Like it's gone. It's nowhere to be found. So I've heard this one's less maybe epic and more of an introduction to like what M.K. Jemisin can do. So I'm very excited to get to it. It's something about gatherers. They harvest the magic of the sleeping mind and use it to heal and soothe and kill those judged corrupt. And then a gatherer named Iru is the most famous of the city's gatherers. He starts to question everything he's known, and it sounds like it deals with dreams and stuff, which I find really interesting. I really like dream type stories. I don't like when it gets too like fever dreamy, but I do like playing with dreams impacting your world, or like monsters coming into dreams or things like that. So I'm very interested to see if I like this, because I feel for some reason way less intimidated by this, and I think that's because people say it's a great place to start, and then if I like this I can move on to her other works because I've heard they're fantastic. And then this one is a historical fantasy, and I know I have so many historical fantasies on my list to still read and I just haven't been picking up as much, but this one really, I heard, again, I think it was Elliot Brooks talking about it as I've been like searching for more fantasy, and that's The Pomegranate Gate by Ariel Kaplan. So this is set in like an era where I think Jews are being converted to Christianity, or they're chosen like either to convert or to be banished. And so our main characters, Toba and Naphtali, they decide to flee, and then it sounds like she gets sucked into like another world. So kind of like in City of Brass, where there's like a world next to the real world that houses like jinn and stuff. It sounds like she gets swept into there, and then he's trying to save her, and she's like navigating this new realm. And I think that sounds really fun. I really like also a parallel world, like a world that's operating next to our own. I really like that, especially in a historical fantasy too. It really seems to work for me, and yeah, I'm excited to give this a try. It's a bit of a chunker, but I'm telling you right now, I'm just in the fantasy vibes, and I can't get enough of it, and so I'm just rolling with it at this point. And then finally I have a Pango order that I had some credits, and it finally arrived. I really don't want to go get scissors though. That's Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death by Selena Godin. This has been on my radar to read for a long time, and I just have not found a copy of it, and so I saw it on Pango and I had some credits. And we're basically having a story told through the perspective of death, and it's like her going through and writing her memories and stuff. And it's just always really intrigued me. I really like death as a protagonist. And I haven't read much of that. And I've also heard that this is a really unique take. So I'm very excited to get to it. And it seems like it's told in a really interesting way too. I'm seeing almost like prose, like poetry almost. What's that called? Verse. So I think that'll be really interesting to try out. So I will finish this and I'll let you know when I'm maybe made it about halfway, and check in with you and let you know some more thoughts on the book. It is a bit later now, and I'm on chapter 28. Yeah, 28. And so I'm making a lot of progress. It reads pretty quickly. The chapters are pretty short, and while it like looks bigger, I feel like the font is pretty big. So I am making a ton of progress. This, I don't know if I mentioned, is a romantasy as well. So there is like some tension happening, but I do think it's an interesting mix, because while it feels slow burn because like nothing has really happened between them, it also simultaneously feels a little bit insta-lovey, or at least like insta lust or insta intrigue with the other person. I'm not necessarily finding it a bad thing. I still think the story is really interesting outside of the romance, and it's not really bothering me that the romance is feeling that way. Like, I don't know, for a YA, I just think it fits the story, and I'm not expecting a ton more from it, you know? I think if this was like an adult book, I might want like a little bit slower of a pace, but in a YA story, I was thinking about this, and I think YA stories, not always, but a lot of times in fantasy ones, it's a lot of like fast-paced plot. The plot really takes off, and while you get character work and you get to enjoy the characters and like the characters and root for them, a lot of times it just is a lot more faster paced. And there's a lot of adult fantasy out there, especially like the kinds I read, that I feel like you take your time with getting to know the characters, and the plot sometimes is secondary, where I feel like in a lot of YA fantasy, the plot is the primary focus with the characters. And so that's, I think, why it's feeling like a little quick with the romance as well for me, because we just like jump right into the plot, and it's been like full steam ahead, unfolding, giving you little reveals here and there. And yeah, it just reads like really quickly. Like every time I end a chapter, I want to go to the next chapter and find out what's happening. So I think it's like keeping my attention really well. It's just not my favorite way to get a romance in a story, but I think it's like working for the story, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna continue on and hopefully finish this here in a little bit because I am thoroughly enjoying it. It doesn't feel quite like a 5-star to me, but it is a really fun series that I will definitely be continuing, though I have heard it's a 5-book series and the 4th book either just came out or is coming out, and so I will have to wait to finish it, but I'm enjoying this a lot. I don't know if I mentioned this either, but I picked it up because I saw Steph from Stephanie Bookish pick it up, and she was like talking about how much she is enjoying it and like flying through it and already on the 2nd book. And I love when people are loving on books and like so excited for them, and it makes me so intrigued why they like them so much, especially when we have some similar tastes. It makes me like intrigued, so that's why I picked it up, and then I thoroughly enjoyed it. So that being said, do I have any other notes about the book? Oh, I also really appreciate, I think I mentioned before, like how much Cameron has having to like learn about life, and there is like a part of the story that I don't know if it's on the synopsis. Okay, it's not. But there is a part of the story that Cameron's having to make a choice that he kind of is like really struggling with. It's calling into question a lot of things he thought he knew, and I think that that storyline is really interesting. There was also a twist that happened halfway through that I really enjoyed. Like, I wouldn't say, when I say a twist, it's not like jaw-dropping, but there was like a person involved that we like got to see how their involvement is gonna play out just a little bit more, and I thought that was a nice addition, even though it wasn't like the world's most surprising twist. I just really liked the inclusion of it because it like upped the intrigue for me. So I'm enjoying it, if you can tell. I am having a great time with being in my fantasy era. Like, don't get me wrong, I love horror and I do love a good mystery and stuff, but I have always from childhood read fantasy and loved fantasy. And as I've gotten to an adult, I've really struggled with like what I enjoy in fantasy, because there seems sometimes like a disconnect of like, I don't always love YA fantasy anymore the way I used to. It just doesn't hit the same for me. But then a lot of like the epic adult fantasy, sometimes it's just gets too much and like too convoluted and too slow paced. And so like I'm trying to find books that find that balance where I like a fantasy world and I like when it sweeps me away, but I also like stories that are a little, I don't know, like magical without having to be so over the top world building. So I'm kind of like all over the place in my fantasy preferences, I guess. And so it's been really hard to figure out like what my taste is in fantasy. And so I've really struggled to articulate that and put it into words and like find the books that I want, because I want to like read all this like epic fantasy, but I need it to have like certain things about it. And I've struggled to like articulate what that is. And finding the Will of the Many, which I'm not going to shut up about, by the way, is like helped me maybe like find an avenue where I can start to explore more of what that is. And then stories like this, like I know I like stories like this where it really sweeps you away. And so finding more stories like this and The City of Brass, like a combination of things like that, I think is gonna be really good. So if you have any suggestions and you want to leave them down below, I would love to hear it, because I just like really want more fantasy recommendations. I'm really loving it. And I must say too, while I'm not the biggest romance reader, like I don't really like contemporary romance. I've tried it a few times and it's just like not my thing. And I've tried some fantasy romance, like romantasy, and sometimes it's not my thing either. But I want to be clear that I do enjoy romance in books, and I'm also trying to discover like what my taste is in romance, and I think it is slow burn. Leaving you with a lot of thoughts, and I've been talking for 8 minutes about this. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna go, and I will see you when I finish the book and let you know final thoughts. It is time to end the video and give you my final thoughts on This Woman Kingdom. This book had me, and you know how I knew it had me is that after I finished it last night, while my husband was making food, gave him an entire breakdown of the whole book from start to end, and gave him all the details, which I don't normally do, but when I'm really into a book, I do. And so he got to listen to that, and I'm sure he was very excited about it. And yeah, especially the last chapter. So I was enjoying the book, don't get me wrong, but the last chapter I was like, okay, yeah, it got me. It got me good. And yeah, the ending, like 100 to 50 pages, revealed a lot of things about the plot that I personally like in these kind of books, especially if I'm going with a YA book. Like, there's lots of angst, there's drama and things like that, and how this ends is like exactly what I enjoy. So I already have I've already ordered off of Pango using some of my credits the next book in the series, and it cannot get here fast enough because I need it. I will have you know I did see if the second book was in stores when I picked this up from half price, and they did not have it, sadly, so I could not get it then. Otherwise, I would be currently reading that right now. So yeah, I think in the end I'm gonna go with a 4.5. I really enjoyed it. I really had a good time, and while it doesn't feel like 5-star, I'm having a great time with it. It's just exactly the kind of fun YA fantasy that just kind of sweeps you away. I don't know. This is just a fun fantasy that like takes itself seriously, but at the same time doesn't, and it's just playing with a lot of the tropes that YA fantasy tends to play with, but in a way that I think really works for me, and I'm excited to continue, and I will definitely be letting you know my thoughts on the rest of the series. But I'm very happy I picked it up, and thank you, Steph, for reading it. I know you weren't recommending it to me, but I inadvertently got a great book out of it, so thank you. But that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to leave a crown emoji for like a kingdom down below, I would love to see it. And thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.